Andor is one of the best, hardest-hitting shows, not just from within Star Wars, but of all time. And one of the biggest reasons that it resonates so well is that so much of it was inspired by real-life rebellions and uprisings. So let's break down as many of the historical references we can so we can see where Andor got some of its incredible inspiration. And I apologize in advance for all of the terrible pronunciations I'm going to try to attempt throughout. Ferrix. The Troubles was a violent sectarian conflict in Northern Ireland that stretched from the 1960s to the 1990s and finally ended with the signing of the Good Friday Agreement in 1998. This at least partly inspired the rebellious activity on Ferrix, particularly the banging of metal as an alert system for police or imperial activity. Vel. As the cousin of Mon Mothma, Bel-Sartha is part of an elite Chandrilan bloodline. Her double life as a revolutionary for the rebellion was inspired by the life of Patty Hearst, heir to the Hearst media fortune. Hearst was kidnapped in 1974 by the Symbionese Liberation Army, where she was exposed to their way of thinking and eventually joined the group. She went on to be part of the robbery of Hibernia Bank, where she helped to hold up prisoners with an AK as the robbery unfolded. It should be noted though, there's a big difference between the way these two were treated by their rebellions. Vel was a key, cherished member of the rebellion, while Patty Hearst endured brutal treatment from the SLA. The Donnies. The steady oppression and removal of the Donnie people on Aldhani drew inspiration from the highland clearances of the 17 and 1800s, when the Gaels were forced to leave their lands by the British. This can also shed light on how Aldhani got its geographic style, as the grassy hills and rock-built ruins draw a direct comparison to the Scottish Highlands. However, the Donnies also undoubtedly drew inspiration from the Sami people of Scandinavia, who share a very similar style of clothing, and the Eye of Aldhani is very visually similar to the Northern Lights. The Aldhani Heist. The Aldhani Heist is one of the most pivotal sequences in the first season, and it's where many people realize this isn't just another Star Wars show, this is something different, something elevated. Tony Gilroy confirmed that this event was inspired by the Tiflis Heist, in which members of the Bolshevik revolutionary group attacked carriages transporting a shipment of Imperial Russian gold, stealing 300,000 rubles, which they then used to fund their movement. The heist was led by Joseph Stalin, and the team featured a mix of rogue gunmen and savvy idealists, much like the Aldhani crew. The Narkina Uprising. The Prisoner Uprising on Narkina 5 is another absolutely iconic arc of Andor, although I probably don't need to say that anymore because basically all of the arcs are now iconic in their own way, but I digress. The prisoners of Narkina discovered through a mistake made by the prison guards that they were never going to be allowed to leave, even if they complete their sentence. This, combined with an incendiary speech by Kino Loy, is enough of a spark to set off a riot where the prisoners overthrow the guards and make their escape into the waters of Narkina. This draws inspiration from the Warsaw Ghetto uprising during World War II. Poles in the Warsaw Ghetto discovered they were ultimately doomed to the death camps and decided to fight back. A civilian commission broadcast that parallels Kino's speech inspired them to keep fighting as they outnumbered the guards and were able to steal weapons just like the Narkina prisoners to aid in their escape. The Rix Road Riot. Marva's funeral on Rix Road was meant to be a peaceful time of mourning for the citizens of Ferrix, but turned into a violent conflict against the Imperials. This scene drew inspiration from the Corporal's killing in Belfast in 1988. The Irish Republican Army were holding a funeral, but two corporals from the British Army ended up in the car procession. The IRA members believed the soldiers were there to attack the funeral because a similar event had taken place just 3 days prior, so they attacked the car. The soldiers in the car drew their weapons, escalating the chaos. They were pulled from the car and searched before being executed. Krennic's Meeting. Early in Season 2, Krennic gathers top ISB and Imperial officials to discuss their secret plan to deal with the Gormans in order to achieve their goal by any means necessary. This meeting drew direct inspiration from the Wannsee Conference, held by Nazi and SS leaders in 1942, to ensure governmental cooperation and coordination in regards to the Nazis' final solution. The Gorman Resistance. The Gorman Resistance plays a massive role in Season 2 and takes direct inspiration from the French Resistance during World War II. The look of the Gormans' clothes is similar, the Gore language is inspired by a blend of European languages but most prominently French phonetics, and the actors playing these Gormans are primarily French. The Gorman Massacre. The Gorman Massacre can be considered the moment that all of ANDOR truly leads up to, the true pivot point that turns the rebellion from a loose idea to a solidified movement, even if it's still in the shadows. The massacre, of course, takes inspiration from multiple historic events, mainly utilizing false flag attacks like the Imperials did as an excuse to crush a population. The Tlatelolco massacre was a military attack committed by the Mexican armed forces against the students from multiple universities in Mexico who were protesting government oppression in 1968. Shots from unseen snipers, later suggested to be government employed, were used as an excuse to fire upon the students, and hundreds were killed. The Maidan Revolution in Ukraine in 2014 saw protesters clash with state forces, resulting in over 100 deaths. And the Jallianwala Bagh massacre in India in 1919 saw protesters get surrounded during a protest as 3 buildings blocked them in and the British Indian Army blocked the only way out. An army general ordered the troops to fire, and the estimate of deaths of the protesters is around 1,500 people. Mon Mothma's speech. And finally, Mon Mothma's moving Death of Truth speech, in which she warned of the devastating consequences of a galaxy in which objective truth is disregarded. It drew inspiration from Walter Cronkite's report on Vietnam, in which he exposed the credibility gap of the government, suggesting that the government had been spreading false narratives about the Vietnam War. Mon's speech also reflects the post-truth society theory, which posits that when our society is overtaken by falsehoods and lies being spread like they're fact, the truth begins to not matter. And although this show was written before 2025, it is a haunting parallel to our own current political climate. Thanks for watching.